Welcome to Church Without Walls. I'm John, and this is, yeah. You're like, what, it's John and Teller. Welcome to the John and Teller Show. Today we're going to talk about, Peyton and I usually decide what we're going to do right before we go on. And she's got something, and I've got nothing. Let me show you what she's got first. Go to the screen. And I don't know if you could see. Oh, let me just go to the full screen. Because stand up a little bit and show them your shirt. Peyton's got a really cool Joker shirt on, which you can't see. So she's doing a Batman coloring book today with Joker, which is a complicated character. And Joker's to the right of me. Get it? And she said just before we go on, because I told my wife today my well feels like it's run dry this morning, and I just dribbled. So Peyton said, let's do a t-shirt day. You talk about what's on your t-shirt, and I'll express my t-shirt in art. And mine says, whisper words of wisdom, let it be, from my favorite, my dribble, from my favorite Beatles song. Song Paul wrote about his mother Mary, and a song that we had played at my mother's funeral. So I think I will talk about that a little bit. But I had jotted down that I wanted to talk to you today about a journey home. And I'll explain that in just a moment, right after this. So Wendy and I spend a lot of time talking to people who are going through deconstruction or who are struggling with having a relationship anymore. Oh, should I apologize? We had a setting on our computer because we were playing around with green screen. So if we've looked fuzzy lately, the last week or two, it's because that setting was still on, and we didn't realize it till Peyton lifted up a green pencil and it was disappearing. So we're back with normal video. What was I saying? So
I don't know.
There's an idea behind deconstruction. Usually people look at deconstruction as, somebody who is leaving the faith or questioning their childhood faith and kind of tearing down structures that no longer work for them or that they no longer believe and searching for truth. And oftentimes deconstruction is framed as somebody leaving home. And I've even done that. I've been guilty of that because, to be honest with you, the beginning of the journey feels like that. And oftentimes you feel alone. You feel alienated from what's familiar because you're questioning it and even leaving some of it. Now, you don't really want to leave the people who you know and love, but sometimes there is no choice, or they don't give you a choice, and you're not welcome in certain communities anymore. And so there is a great deal of it that feels like leaving home. And I've used the analogy of Plato's cave, and you even saw my favorite piece of Peyton's artwork was when she did Plato's cave out of Play-Doh. That's still my favorite. I love the double entendre there. And the idea of leaving Plato's cave is like leaving home, or the comparison, Shyamalan's famous portrayal of Plato's cave in his movie The Village. Yeah, the idea of escaping that kind of mentality, that kind of lifestyle. You'd have to walk through these wild, strange, scary woods and climb a chain link fence before you find civilization. I want to rephrase it, though, in a manner that I think is more fulfilling, more healthy, long-term, and more sustaining. And that is, if we take the perspective as we're weighing these spirits and finding some of them wanting and finding others valuable, if we look at it more
along the lines of a journey toward home, I think there's much more hope there. There's much more hope in that. And a change of perspective really can change your life. Just a slight change in your mind can and how you view something can really change your whole lifestyle, your goals, your hopes, what you feel is your present needs and your wants. And what kind of elicited this? I know you weren't awake yet, Poe, but I was having a conversation with my brother-in-law, who's a graduate student, anthropology student, and he's writing a paper about how anthropology can change your perspective on life, whether some of your political inclinations or some of the things that you've grown up with culturally that have been possibly overstated, and anthropology, learning about how people all around the world are alike in ways and different in others, can and certainly in different eras, can certainly give you a deeper understanding, and maybe an appreciation, not only for the differences but for the similarities. And I was reminded of a great quote, really, by an astronaut who felt the same way when he was orbiting Earth. He felt this intense need to bring people with him. And one of my favorite scenes in the movie Contact is when Jodie Foster actually is transported and makes contact. And when she's seeing the awe and the glory of something she just can't cognitively articulate, she finally comes to this very humble moment where she says, they shouldn't have sent a scientist. They shouldn't have sent me. They should have sent a poet, right? Because a poet would be better suited to capture the awesome experience that she was having, that was broadening her perspective and deepening her perspective. Well, Edgar D. Mitchell once said, when he saw Earth from space, he said it causes one to develop an instant global consciousness. And he goes on to point out that from out there on the moon, international politics look so petty. From out there on the moon, international politics look so petty. You want to grab a politician by the scruff of the neck and drag him 250,000 miles out and say, look at that, you son of a bitch. And this kind of thinking is called the overview effect. And Carl Sagan wrote of it too. He said, think of the rivers of blood. This when he wrote the Pale Blue Dot, which he had asked for NASA to take a picture of the Earth from a certain perspective, and they did. And you see this pale blue dot just in the sky. And in that wonderful book, he says, think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors, so that in glory and triumph they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. The momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner. See, when we have a ground up perspective, we get very territorial and tribal. And yet if we have the God perspective, the overview effect, it can't help but shape our mindset, and we see the falling down of false barriers and walls that probably should never have been built in the first place. And so I would just like to suggest to you, many of the people that go through deconstruction see it as leaving home, and it feels that way. And sometimes you're disowned from your family. Sometimes your community is scared of you. They don't want you to rub off on others in the community because they like the status quo. They don't want anyone to rock the boat. They don't want anyone to, harsh their buzz. You're going fast. I better pick it up. So, but what I'd say to you is, as the journey progresses, as you become more comfortable and maybe more even excited about being a student for life. I just saw an old interview with Stevie Ray Vaughan recently, and they were asking him about his style in comparison to Jimi Hendrix. And he gave great respect to Jimi Hendrix, but he said, we're different. We're different guitar players. And the last question the host asked him, I thought was better suited. She asked him, are you still a student? Are you still a student? And there's a certain humility in his answer. He said, of course, yes. And he said, when I stop having the desire to learn, I'll stop playing. And I just think that the longer we're on our road, whatever you call it, if you call it spiritual growth, if you call it deconstruction or reconstruction, whatever you call it, the longer we're on that road, the more comfortable we become with maybe not knowing what's around the bend. Not having all the answers, realizing that there is no map on this journey. We might have a certain inclination of the direction we're going, but there really, no one has drawn this map. No one's been there. Not quite the way that we are on this journey. And certainly you could read, travel logs of other people who've traveled here, but you don't really kind of know where you are on that journey as compared to others. And you grow to feel more comfortable. It's not as scary as you thought it would be. And initially, the wounds start to heal from broken relationships or from maybe some cruel things that were said about you, and you start to be more enamored with the glory of the road ahead than the pain that exists in the rearview mirror. The pain never goes away, but you can have a different perspective on it. The moment you realize that we're actually journeying toward home. Now, I love this metaphor because in the past I've given you the metaphor that C.S. Lewis uses about somebody journeying towards his home that's above him on the mountain. And when he's at the very bottom of the mountain, he could look up and see his home. And of course, the shortest distance is straight up, but he can't climb the mountain there, right? To get closer to home, he has to go further away from it and wind around the mountain on the mountain road to get to home. So he has to go further away from home to get closer to it in this understanding. And oftentimes that's what we have to do. I'm reminded when I first started studying why people were leaving the church, why this mass exodus of our precious brothers and sisters and our children who are leaving the faith even. I heard a friend of mine say about another friend who had deconverted. He said, John, sometimes you have to leave Christianity to find Christ. And boy, my mind went, that resonated so much. And I thought of the old quote by the English wag who said, sometimes to view true Christianity, you have to ignore nearly all Christians. And there's truth in both of those sayings. And so try and view our journey together as a journey toward home. And maybe we're getting further away from it with the questions we ask, with the communities we're currently in or walking with. And yet the journey will be worth it, because where we're coming from wasn't home. It might have seemed that way for a period of time, but and try not to worry about those who don't initially walk with you. You can have relationships with people who don't think like you. Hopefully, we're adult enough to realize that love doesn't stop at a border. Love doesn't stop where at a voting booth. Love doesn't stop because someone goes into a cathedral and someone else goes into a mosque, or somebody goes into a Starbucks, or even a football stadium. No. The journey you will find yourself on, your family will expand. And while certain things might feel like a great winnowing, when you lose intimacy with people who have been close to you up till that time, and you find out, well, they were only intimate with us because we thought the same. And the moment we started to think differently on things that they hold very important, then they couldn't sustain a relationship with us. My father used to always say, look, always picture your relationships as kind of an adjoining hotel room. You know, if you've ever been in those, I know they're rare these days, but back in the day, we used to stay in a room and our friends would get the room next to us, and sometimes you'd have to open two doors, a door on each side, to be able to pass through the rooms. And sometimes we'd have both doors open and the kids would be going back and forth. And then at night, you'd close the doors. My father used to use that as an analogy, and he'd say, look, when there becomes an alienation between two people, sometimes both doors get slammed shut. But eventually come to the place where your door is at least open on your side. Leave your door open for the possibility of reconciliation. C.S. Lewis had a dear friend who died in his 40s, very young, during World War II. He didn't die in combat. He died of some fluke medical mishap. But Charles Williams once said something very powerful. He said, many a reconciliation founders, because two people arrive, both willing to forgive, but neither willing to accept forgiveness. Many a reconciliation never happens because two people come together, and I'm willing to forgive you for what you've done, but I'm not willing to be forgiven for what I've done. In other words, sometimes forgiveness is just another way to place blame on something that might be more my fault or might be shared fault. And that person who's willing to forgive isn't necessarily the most mature or the most empathetic or loving person in the relationship. You know, and that is something that we have to pray about and that we have to meditate on, because we want to be that type of person that leaves our door open. So, let me cut over to this and we'll see Peyton's progress while I take a drink. What are you doing with Joker here? You kind of reversed the...
Mm-hmm.
You want to explain it a little bit, what you're doing there?
No, no.
You'll explain it later?
Sure.
All right. So I want to wrap it up here by just saying that, you know, sometimes when people first feel the trauma, you know, sometimes you have to get away from a relationship to fully recognize the trauma you lived in. You know, it's almost like a smell that you get used to in your house. You know, if people smoke in the house or what have you, and you're a smoker and you don't even realize that it smells like that. But if you go away for a while and then you come back in, you sense the smell. Or if you give up smoking, then it becomes more ominous. It's like when I used to live in Park Ridge, we were right in the flight path of O'Hare Airport, and you just got used to hearing a plane pass over your house every few minutes. You didn't even hear it, but if you had guests from out of town come and stay, they were amazed we were able to live there, you know. And just sometimes we get comfortable in situations that are traumatic, and we don't really realize it. The battered wife who's lived with a man for 25 years and has been shaped by his perspective of who she is, and her whole esteem is tied to pleasing him or getting his approval. Same thing with the child, with the unapproving father or the domineering mother. They don't really realize how toxic, how traumatic that relationship is until they get away from it, or maybe they're in a more healthy one later, and then they look back and they say, how did I survive that long under those circumstances? When some people are going through deconstruction and they walk away from their faith, or from at least that corner of their faith that breeds trauma and toxicity, sometimes they throw everything away. As the saying goes, they throw the baby away with the bathwater. And so, they've gone from one extreme to another. In other words, they don't integrate what was beautiful about their background because they're so hurt by what was ugly that they don't even want to consider it. And they're triggered by maybe hearing, flipping through the radio and landing on Caleb, and they hear a Christian song that they heard at church and they don't even want to hear it. Or they're triggered by, even drive. I've had friends who get a sick feeling in their stomach from even driving by a church. It's the traumas, the PTSD is so deep. And oftentimes one of the biggest casualties is the Bible. This doesn't look like a Bible, it looks like a textbook, but this is my newest Bible. And I bring this up to tell you that one of the people that both Peyton and I admire is named Rhett McLaughlin of what's that show called? Mystical Morning? Great Mystical Morning? Something like that. Well, they're YouTube guys. And they actually took a show to declare their deconversion. And they shared their deconversion. They talked about how they deconstructed over the years out of the faith. And one of the casualties, and Red admits it, was the Bible. And he spent a few years not even looking at a Bible or being able to open one because he was so triggered by what they went through. And then recently, I don't know, it might have been within the last year, Rhett did another show on how he's become friends again with the Bible. And it was because he heard an academic talk about it. And the academic wasn't worshiping the Bible. He wasn't celebrating the Holy Father, the Holy Son, and the Holy Bible. He was talking about the Bible and the wealth of wisdom and what you can get out of the Bible, but he didn't make it divine. He didn't make it God's word. And Rhett said it was fascinating to hear the insights that he was bringing out of the same book that he couldn't even look at anymore, that he didn't even want in his house. And so he ordered a Bible. It happens to be the one I'm holding up here, which I'm going to recommend to you. Now listen, if you still cringe at the idea of opening a Bible because you've been, it's a trigger for you, I'm not trying to talk you into anything. I get it. You may never come around to wanting to open this again. I understand that. And you know who else does? So does God. It isn't a requirement to have a relationship with him. Otherwise, a lot of people who never had one or before this existed would be shortchanged. They'd be children of a lesser God. So if this is not you, fine. I'm not a Bible, what do they call them, thumper. I'm not going to beat you over the head with it. But I'm going to say if you're at a place where you're more comfortable, where you realize looking back that there were some passages maybe a lot of passages, maybe more than just some, in the Bible that you remember highlighting because they were remarkable, that did contain wisdom and not, cruelty or foolishness, they those words or those concepts still resonate in your heart. I am saying there's a path to become friends with the Bible again, and it might start with, well, this particular Bible. This is a New Oxford. Where do I hold this up? This is a New Oxford annotated Bible, and it's an academic version. And so it's not a study Bible that gives you the particular bent of your, say, your Calvinist tribe or your dispensationalist tribe. It's something more of an academic background. There's two Bibles I recommend these days, and this is one of them. And the notes in it are outstanding. But it's not trying to sell you anything. It's not trying to sell you a denomination. It's not trying. There's very little propaganda in this Bible, and it's a well done version. And if you want to approach the Bible again in that way, to come around again, to circle around, and to maybe relish some of those old passages that you really liked, or even see what the academics say, what the experts in their field say about the difficult passages, pick one up. Rhett said he really looks forward to reading the Bible now because he picked one of these up, and I feel the same. The other Bible, just so I get it out, is called the Net Bible, N-E-T Bible. That is that is compiled by a group of Christian scholars who are textual critics, and they're honest. It's very honest. Like if you get to the John 8, the woman taken adultery, it'll say in the notes right there that this wasn't in the original Greek manuscripts. This was added later. It'll give you those notes about those passages which are, where there's some a great deal of skepticism about. And so that will be good for you too if that's something you're interested in. But if you only have to choose one, I'd say go with this, the New Oxford Annotated Bible. And I like the soft cover. This actually has the Apocrypha in it too. So it's an ecumenical study Bible, it's called. So I like it, and I'm just suggesting to you that as you recover some of these things, I'll make one more recommendation to you, and that is a man whose name used to be very controversial in Christian circles, and his name is Rob Bell, and he was pastors of Mars Hill, and now he has a podcast and he speaks around the world. But one of the things I like about Rob Bell, who went through Deconstruction before many other people did, and who left his church to pursue a deeper ministry, which was inspiring to me. Both, Rob Bell and actually Francis Chan were inspiring to me as a pastor who would leave a church. But one of the things I like about Rob Bell is this, and I'll say that there's another attribute of deconstructionists that bothers me and that hurts me a little bit, and that is that a lot of the people who've deconstructed that are online, or they write books, or they're on YouTube or what have you, they have really accentuated the bitterness or the hurt that they've gone through. And so many times they speak, I wouldn't say with anger, but I'd say with a lack of appreciation for the good that they came out of. And not everything that we grew up in was horrid or toxic or traumatic. And what I like about Rob Bell is he focuses on health, and he doesn't just beat up his old self or the world he came out of. He doesn't beat up on the village just because he jumped the chain link fence. And he integrates, to claim a phrase from evolutionary psychology, he integrates the good from where he's come from. So on this journey home, he doesn't just rip on where he used to live. He relishes what was good from there, what he could take from there that was salvageable and that was worthy of praise. And he'll integrate that. And he doesn't spend a lot of time beating up, his old life. Even though he could, we all have scars, we all have wounds, and sometimes it is effective to talk about those things. But he doesn't major in them. And so one of the things I like about his podcast is he focuses on the excitement of the journey and the positive nature of what's in front of us and not necessarily how ugly our past has been. This idea of integrating that which was good from our past is something we do when it comes to school. Peyton right now is in middle school, and when you're in high school, it would be silly to want to be back in the third grade, right? And yet there are things that we learned in the third grade and that were very positive, and they were necessary for the time. We weren't ready for advanced algebra or calculus in the third grade, right? So there were some things that were necessary, and there are still some things that carry over. Like all I ever needed to learn in life, I learned in kindergarten. When it comes to, saying please or saying thank you or saying I'm sorry, some of these foundational principles that develop character that we learn very early on are still worthy of being relished in our time and integrated as we grow into a more complex adult. So consider that. Now, there are going to be some moments of this journey that you're on. You're not ready for that. You're still hurting and you're still grieving and you're still mourning and possibly you're still being alienated or you're still being bullied by people in the rearview mirror. People are still trying to drive up alongside your car and throw an egg at you, or they're flipping you off as you drive by. What have you? I'm not trying to say ignore all that. That's part of the process, but I am saying don't spend your perspective looking in the rear view mirror or the side view mirror. The windshield is 90% of what's important. And then take this perspective that we're not leaving home, not leaving a broken home, but we're headed toward home. And to some, the journey is the home. As we started the show with that great quote from Jennifer James, the journey toward the heart is always a journey home. So I don't know if those were words of wisdom, but Let It Be, the song, is also really kind of a definition of what it means to say amen at the end of a prayer. People would ask me, they've said amen for 20 years as a Christian. They didn't know what it means. And it actually means like, may it be. Lord, may it be. Let it be is not too poorly of a translation. And so Mary's advice to a dreaming Paul McCartney to let it be is very special for me, because I had a mother who was very adept at loving unconditionally and making people feel welcome. And if there was ever a picture of unconditional love and the reflection of Christ in the flesh on earth, I've saw it incarnated, because I wasn't around in the first century to meet the true Christ. I saw an incarnation in Mary Kirkwood, and many others have seen that too, and hopefully we can grow toward that ourselves. I'm about wrapped up. How are you?
I'm done.
You're done? All right, hold on a second. Should I go to this one here? You want to talk about it there, or? Okay, what do we got? We got Joker.
Mm-hmm.
He looks like he's in his lair, because there's like some There's some instruments of evil here, I think. I don't know what these are. But I see some
Perfect for
knives.
Sunday.
They're what?
Perfect for Sunday.
Perfect for a Sunday? Instruments of torture? Okay, that was for a Freudian slip. But I noticed that you've changed the colors up a little bit. You went with purple hair and green suit. Is that purposeful? I mean, sometimes he's got to mix it up, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to switch it.
What's your attraction to the Joker?
No, I like Batman.
You like Batman, so you like his villain.
Yeah.
The Joker. Well, Batman does have the best villains. I mean, Spider-Man villains kind of blow, but other than what, the Goblin, Spider-Man villains blow, but Batman villains are iconic. So
I love the Joker too. Folks, that's all we got for you today. Hope you have a wonderful Sunday. We'll be with you next week. God bless.